Conversation by Julie Benetti and Susan Barbaro is a production of EI Publishing in association with EI Alliance, copyright 2018. Visit eipublishing.com for more. Music for this series is courtesy of New Threads, copyright 2018, from their self-titled album, available now. This is Julie Benetti, and I'm here with Susan Barbaro, and we are walking the streets of Salem right before Halloween. We just came from Mercy Tavern. Big shout out to Ashley and Adam. Ashley came all the way out from Ohio to see her brother, and spotted a few tarot cards for her. She was excited about that. Yeah, that's a plug for me.
Yeah,
and here we are walking around Salem, just exploring the energy.
Yeah, like everybody here is kind of having fun, and as we get to walk a little faster, it looks like Santa Claus is following us.
Well, there's always either Frankenstein, Santa Claus, Phantom of the Opera, or a couple of people with bloody makeup on following you when you're hanging out in Salem when it's pre-Halloween.
But we're actually looking, as we always do, to get into the energy.
And we are in the energy, and this is really cool. What I was saying to you before when we did our podcast on Salem was that the energy here is just cool to walk on the cobblestones. Here we are walking on the cobblestones. We're right in front of Pickering Wharf. And there's an immensity of energy here. There's tons of people if you go further down where Essex Street is. But here we are, just exploring. We're just passing the Hawks House here, and there's a lot of historical homes here right in front of Pickering Wharf because it's along the shoreline. And there's a lot of like crazy energy. You're looking off. It's dark back there behind the houses, and this is really the spirit of Salem. When you get, and I was saying to you before, when you get in the space between. Mm-hmm. And the space between is all the space between the craziness of the costumes, the craziness of the fanfare. I mean, you go down to where the park is, you go down to where the Witch Museum is. And where the Witch Museum is, the cool part about that is there's like, you know, it's like a little amusement park area. There's fried dough, you know, you can get, what is it, a sub sausage sandwich or whatever the heck it is.
Sausage, peppers, and onions, which is the favorite of the Italians within us.
And that's what you were, you know, thinking about. Hey, should I eat that tonight? Instead, we stopped there at Mercy Tavern. And we got to hang out with some folks from Ohio that made fun of your Boston accent.
There you go. And we're now in front of, is this the Custom House?
Yes, it is.
You know, you walk through and it's like really kind of spooky when you look at it. What's that on the top? It's like a golden crest of the eagle.
It's an eagle.
And it's... and the rest of it's it is the Custom House.
And the cool part about Salem too is you can take any of those historical tours, but you can also just walk the streets yourself and stand in front of these buildings and think about the time period when these people actually lived in these buildings.
And this building, the Custom House, is facing the water.
Right.
So you can imagine that, of course, it must have been related to a captain or, you know, someone who's obviously involved with the sea.
Right.
And it's pretty old, let me tell you, looking at it, the way that shutter is and that it's not completely, you know, flat. Makes you wonder.
You're right. And you know, it's funny because we passed the Hawthorne Hotel earlier and they did some Halloween decorations where there was some like maniac guy. Remember the print I showed?
Yes.
Look up on the third floor.
Yeah.
And it looked like he was like a murderer in the window, but that was just a Halloween decoration. But
yes.
Here you can feel the energy of it.
And that's
really
of course what we're really more interested in. We're not interested in the fanfare, and we're not interested in the, the hoopla, if I want to call it that. It's actually getting a little bit more quieter now because we waited to be, before we did the podcast, to give it a little bit of time.
And it's, around after 9 p.m.
It's 10:30.
It's way after 9 p.m. It's 10:30, and we're really in the vibes of the energy where we are here on Pickering Wharf, walking around. And we're sharing that with you because our podcasts are about energy.
So, Julie, let me ask you, when you were walking through here, and we just actually got off of some of the brick pathways, and now it's a little bit more, cement. What is it that you feel when you go through here?
Well, the feeling comes from a sensation of the actual sensual part of it, and the sensual part of it is what I smell. I smell the leaves. I almost smell the ancestry of the element of it being the wharf right here and being where all kind of the shipments came in where the industry occurred, where there's a lot of side streets, and where some cool stuff is going on.
So part of what I get is that when we're talking about the wharf, and of course we have people walking by, so we stop every now and then because we don't want them to listen. They don't get the benefit because they're not listening. But it's also just an energy of the history. I mean, it goes so far back. I mean, I would, I guess I should have done more of my homework, but I could have given a date for when the stuff, started. But this house, like we're right in front of right here, I don't know what the name of the
Hodges
house.
Court.
I don't know what the name of this house is, but it gives you that sense of, I mean, you can almost feel the energy of people waiting, just sitting there and waiting for their loved ones to come back.
And you hit it explicitly of what the feeling is of the energy here, of that, and also kind of the magic of the history and the legacy that goes back through the ancestry of everybody who lived here, who worked here, who, experienced whatever was going on here. And
there's people having fun, and that's awesome. But the truth of the matter is that, all that having fun is really based in real stuff that occurred. As we walk through, and you walk through certain parts, and it's Salem. Like you're walking through, and you can feel the energy of, the fear of what people were going through during that time of the witch trials, and who was going to be, charged with being a witch.
And it's kind of funny because, like you said, you feel that, and you feel the energy like coming up from the ground, and I've said that before. And then, some hokey costume person in a costume walks by with makeup and something else on, and you think, really?
Yeah, but
and yet that's the fun of Halloween versus Samhain. So, that's what
so you're going to have to, at some point, have to discuss what that actually means, because I don't really know what that means.
And that's just, a generation of the pre-celebration of what, Halloween was before it became Halloween.
And so, past all the crazy hoopla, because today is what,
Friday night before Halloween?
Friday night before Halloween. So, and we are and it is 10:30, and so we got a lot of drunk people that are going to be going by.
We're actually
it's the
standing
27th.
In front of the Bunghole. It's a really cool bottled liquor place. You can get lottery tickets, liquor in there. It's a really fun place. A pack of gum. We're going to take a left and go down, I think, into Pickering Wharf. There's a great little coffee shop there, but I'm not drinking coffee.
No.
So there was a ghost story here about someone who fell over or something, who was drunk or fell over into the water. God, it must be so weird.
Maybe just on Halloween. Do you want? Can I do that and be a part of it? Yeah, I know.
That's the church you walk into to see if you're going to go into flames because you're a witch or not.
Really?
I just say that, but...
These people must hate this time of year.
It's life they get to... Here we are back.
We're at the Salem Witch Trials Memorial.
Right. And where there's a stone placed out in a really beautiful way for each of the people that was accused of witchcraft. And you really have to come here to see it, to feel it.
But there is a house in the back, just behind it, that we have both had an interesting vibe to. And there's actually, as I stand here, there's been 2 or 3 people that have stopped and have said the same thing, that, they get a really weird or creepy vibe is what they said.
There's some interesting, a lot of people are taking pictures of it as well. It's right adjacent to it.
Yeah. So we're at a point where all of a sudden we're going to start having we're going to have another tour come through.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Yeah. As these people who are dressed completely, maybe not a tour, maybe they're finishing.
So at this point, we can go ahead and walk right to the Witches' Memorial. We're going to kind of walk through it and share the energy with you, because it is pretty startling, because all these people were condemned to witchcraft when they didn't actually perform it.
Well, that
Yet
we
they
know.
stayed true. Right, but they could have worked with herbs, they could have worked with things, and it was a different contemplation of it. And it's actually bordering, a graveyard right behind. And you can see all the kitschy stuff further as there's dry gas and stuff being released into the air as they're performing other stuff.
And you can also see a group of people dressed in costume that are going through, that are looking at each one and stopping at each point to just acknowledge the name on the stone.
Right. And that's important. Sometimes we include candles, or there's Bridget Bishop.
She was hanged June 10th.
1692.
And you can hear in the background people being loud and having fun, but here's Sarah Good, hanged June 19th.
July 19th.
Okay.
1692.
Here's Elizabeth Howe. She was hanged July 19th, 1692. We're going to stop here for a minute because we're really at where the grave is.
Right, and we're kind of the vortex. Right behind it is a graveyard. A lot of people go there and do rubbings, but there's also a lot of energy to kind of acknowledge there as well.
And then behind us is the back of the Peabody Essex Museum, but then there's also another one of the houses. I'm not sure which one. You probably, Julie, would know. Looks like it could be the House of Seven Gables, or
no, it's one of the Nathaniel Hawthorne's house.
Oh, there you go.
Down where we were.
Oh.
But this one is really cool too, because this is the one that people take photos of, because you kind of see something going on in there and you're not sure what it is, energy or what.
We're going to continue on, as we have lots of people going by us that are all dressed up looking at us funny.
And there's Susanna Martin, right, dressed up looking at us funny because we're not dressed up.
That's exactly. or yeah, exactly.
And of course we can't name all of the people here with stones dedicated to them as the memorial, but it is pretty poignant. Rebecca Nurse is here as well, hanged July 19th, 1692. And when you get into the energy and the vibe of this, you almost want to take a couple seconds, put your hand on the stone, and just look out towards the graveyard behind them and just feel the presence.
Well, again, sometimes to me it's just a feeling of understanding of what they went through, the fear and the craziness and the hysteria, and just being in this space during that time. It's just unimaginable what must have been going through their minds. So, what's interesting is, as we're looking at the graveyard and we're looking at the stones, certain people that are dressed up kind of come by and, make their presence known, as if to say, hey, look at me, like banging there's one person went by, he's got a big staff in his hand, and he like bangs it against the ground, as if to say, here I am. It was fascinating, as along the way, there's nothing that they're understanding of what's going on around them. They're having fun, which is fine, but it's really hard to stay concentrated in that space of the energy.
Right, and it's funny too, because sometimes you don't know if the person is banging it to give acknowledgement to the stone. You don't know if they're just banging it because they want attention. You don't know what the situation is. A lot of times these stones have a lot of junk on them that has to be cleaned off, which is really sad, because you don't really come here to party. You come here to honestly pay respect to people that stood really firm on their principles of who they were, rather than who they weren't.
Well, I think it's just a matter of, like anything else in life, that people just knew who they were, or not. But when I look at some of these other people, you don't know what they're thinking.
No, you don't. And as we walk through the Witch Memorial, people often leave flowers, letters, notes, sometimes from ancestors, especially at this time, with some feeling or sentiment. And it could be an emotional moment walking through the memorial, especially when you can kind of get it when there are no tours going on and there's just a little bit of silence in between each stone as you see the name and you see what kind of death they experienced and the date of it. It's very poignant to the experience of Salem. This is Giles Corey Stone, and this is the gentleman who was pressed to death by the weight of stone, where he kept on saying more weight, holding steadfast to the fact that he wasn't a witch. Here we are walking through Essex Street. There's a lot of activity going on, but there could be more. There could always be more.
This place is crazy. We left the witches' memoriam just to find that there were a couple of people who decided to sit down because they were so drunk. and which was fine. That's the way it goes.
Well,
and now
it's
there's
not cool to sit on.
No,
one of
it's
the
not
rocks
at all.
that's a
But
memorial.
we
That's not
just
great
were
at all, one
like,
of the stones,
you know,
yeah.
that's you just got to walk away sometimes and
Right.
just let it go.
Because there are always locals here that'll tell them the way it
That's
is.
right.
And
Good
we
luck
ran into
to
a
them.
great one along the way.
Oh
who,
my God!
Caught
And-
someone peeing in the trees and around.
Well, she went up
Essex
to one
Museum.
of the
one of the tours had a
one
great
of the
question
tours
asked.
she had. She sat there and told them where they were wrong, and she was right.
All right, that's how it works here in Salem.
Yeah,
and
and
that's the fun energy of it as well.
exactly.
Because there's a lot of people that kind of transplant themselves in here, and then there are a lot of locals that say, nope, this is the history, this is the way it is.
And we're walking our way across, and we're finding the Salem Psychic Fair and Witches Market. And this place, if you can hear in the background, is packed. They are packed. Everyone's here for a psychic reading. Yet no one's willing to take this, take the time to walk and feel what they feel on their own.
And when you're walking on the cobblestone bricks here on Essex Street, you can really feel some cool energy. You really can. Whatever you want to say, if you move past all the hokey, for some reason Teletubbies are big this year. There's a lot of Teletubby costumes. A couple of dinosaurs,
Yeah.
stuffed dinosaurs. I don't know what that's about.
Was that
but
Barney?
I don't know. I thought it was a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
So I've been a little bit astonished with the Frankenstein. That was the first one I saw when I walked, and I was like, whoa. There's a couple of witches. This one with a hat that's probably 4 feet long above her head.
There you go.
So this is interesting.
Probably a bought one, not a made one.
Oh,
But then
God.
that's
Oh,
okay.
wait a minute. And then to the right is a group of another coven, and as we sit and discuss
Walk and
this,
discuss.
they all look at each other as if, who are you? Are you part of our coven or not? Oh, and there's a ton of witches dressed full regalia.
We're right in front of the historical Almies clock. You see the Almies clock? There hasn't been an Almies around in forever.
And where did the clock come from?
From Almies, when there was an Almies here. Remember Almies? ALMYS? Oh my God, it was like a 5 and dime store.
Oh, I remember Almies. Isn't that like a skincare product company or something?
No, I don't know, but it's a very
Almies.
historical element to Salem.
Oh,
And
I
here it
didn't
is on
know
Essex
that.
Street. Pretty quiet all by itself in its own costume, standing there.
And we got
There's everyone screaming in the background.
We got the police officers right next to us, and they're keeping
Oh,
everything
they're great.
in
The
line.
Salem police are great. Yep.
They're keeping everybody in
Yep.
line, which
They
is
do a great
wonderful.
job.
Yep, they do a great job.
So we're ending our Salem podcast here. We passed the Gulu Gulu, took a picture for some folks at the Samantha Stevens Bewitched statue.
Yep,
Now we're just heading back.
I can see my little car sitting there, it's just waiting to be called upon.
Yeah, they had the streets closed and now they opened them up. They're really good. We talked to a couple of great Salem police officers here. They're really good at moving the traffic.
So we're gonna try to figure out where we're gonna end with the energy of this. Maybe when we go back, we'll have a little quick conversation or conversation in the car, maybe. as we
Yes,
drive
why not?
around.
That's perfect as we drive through Salem making our exit, much like a broomstick. So here we are making our exit from Salem. All in all, that was a very energized trip, wouldn't you say? Walking along the streets.
Absolutely. The people made it fascinating, fun, and entertaining. And the energy had the ground raised to lift and meet our feet.
I agree with you. For me, it was all about the energy and the space between,
Straight.
and that's what the exotic part of Salem is, at least for me. So put all the costumes aside. You just be there with who you are, and you express yourself in the energy, and it's a pretty cool place.
Yeah. So I also think some of the people there are a little bit crazy. I'm all for having a good time, but I think some of these people get into costume and they really take on a different persona, and sometimes that's a little bit odd because there's a part of them that I think that they completely lose, which I think would be great in some respects, but in some respects I think makes it a little eerie. That's the part I think that's eerie.
Sometimes when it gets to the macabre, it gets very eerie. I
Yeah.
agree with you. Yet I have seen some unbelievable, over the years, exquisite costumes like Phantom of the Opera, and you would just think they went all out. And they were the most beautiful costumes, especially on Halloween night, just as people are walking around, and people from all over the world are taking pictures of them. And I myself have dressed with groups in, hoop skirts and capes and costumes, and it's fun. It's actually fun when you do it. And like we said earlier, we met Ashley and Adam, and they were dressed as Cruella de Vil and the puppy catcher and two of the Dalmatians, right? Mm-hmm. So that was, usually you find that, groups, that's really fun. It's kind of the team mentality of what the costume is, and they travel together as a group.
And yet there was one guy who was by himself dressed as Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
And that's when I sit back and I say, okay, you still got to keep your wits about you.
Right.
And, I think sometimes people, when you're out by yourself with a group and you're playing a whole thing, I totally get it.
And here we are passing the entering Salem side.
And now we're in Peabody.
And now we're in Peabody. And that concludes our Salem excursion, testing the energy and the space between. This has been a production of EI Publishing in association with EI Alliance. Listen to other episodes and visit eipublishing.com to find more energized podcasts and books. Find New Threads' self-titled album, New Threads, on iTunes, Spotify, Bandcamp, or at newthreads.us. Thank you for listening.